part of the city. And additionally, the guidelines will have, it'll set out what you can do without HBRB review and what you cannot do without HBRB review. So a lot of the minor things, like interior work, demolition, and small additions and changes to the facade and storefront can be done without talking to HBRB if the guidelines clearly state what you can and cannot do. Because that'll also promote efficiency of what HBRB can hear, which is the bigger things like additions, major changes to the buildings, and so forth. And so the second part of the guideline will be about additions, and a lot of this revolved around what was all in the small area plan and the FAR on the spine and general economic development of this area that has been so great so far. So the theory behind this is that, and a lot of it is based on walkable planning theory. The width of a street in DC is typically 100 feet, and most buildings in DC are the width of the street plus 20 feet. That's the rule around building height in DC. What we've got
the width of the street from building face
from building face to building
That's not
face.
the street itself.
Right.
That's the sidewalks, any kind of parking lane, the street, another parking lane, sidewalk.
So the public right of way, anywhere where any public person can go is 100 feet. So what we've got here is a situation where we've got wide streets, which is fantastic. We've got a 100-foot wide right of way. And what we're proposing is creating a historic easement in which you cannot build within the first 50 feet of the property line. So that is so that all of these goals are, all of these buildings are protected, and all of these goals are the foremost, which is protecting the existing buildings through a historic easement. And then behind that easement, after setting back a reasonable amount, using a formula which basically says that the right of way halfway through is now so much wider, you basically created a 150-foot wide public zone because you've expanded the 100 feet plus the setback of the easement, that you can now build to a building which is actually much lower than the surrounding buildings. You've got a 100-foot tall building here on the wider street, and then proportionally an 80-foot tall building that's set back a total of 125 feet on 4th Street and a total of 150 feet. So this is part of this is maintaining a unique character of these buildings in this place in the city. There is no place like this in DC that has a 150-foot wide public right of way with these canopies that will be maintained and always be open, and buildings set back behind that and above that. And part of this language will include guidelines about the architectural design and excellence in design, usage of materials that are compatible with the historic structures, and just a full HBRB review will be involved with anything that involves such construction. And then, I'd just like to leave you with some of the examples of, some storefront designs that we've done that sort of typify what we imagine could be done with the actual street wall, because a lot of this control over the design is to make it a place that's clean, safe, welcoming, but still can be active and allow owners to be very flexible in what they want to do. So for example, you can see how it's very carefully maintaining the material and the character and the texture of the neighborhood, so that it maintains its historic integrity. So that's what we've come up with so far, understanding that it's only a month that we've had to work on this.
So we're happy to take any questions. So if you stop us or interrupt us if you need to.
So I'm just gonna say with that. So we are out of time. It does sound like
we make 8 minutes.
So what I was saying was I think I'm hearing from Commissioner Woods that you're looking for a vote on an item. So I suggest we add 3 minutes for questions and then vote. Commissioner, any objections to that? Okay, so let's 3 more minutes and then you want to go ahead and go to questions.
2 questions. One, I want to hear from Ms. Ide. How are you? Come on up. You are pretty much an expert in the field. I want to hear what your take is on the recommendations, and have you had any preliminary feedback from the Historic Preservation Review staff?
We are in the process of doing this, been working with Sohail and Jeff on this, and we think that something that will keep this intact but allow some controlled development on setback on top of it would be a good way to balance a future for this area so that it is not kept without the benefit of the economic development that was, let's say, put forward in the small area plan, but still would preserve the historic buildings and their general character.
And you raise a good question, and to, you know, what kind of feedback have we had from HPRB and so on. So some of our frustration is that, you know, the hearing was scheduled on in September on the 22nd. They postponed it. They didn't postpone it a lot of time. And in the hearing, we asked HPRB to give staff, which is HPO and OP, direction to have a community process, you know, to create some kind of community process so that these kinds of things and these questions could be vetted and people could add their opinions and so on. They sort of declined to do that. So we're sort of attempting, and I wouldn't say it's robust where we're rushing through this, but we're attempting to sort of do that before November 3rd. And so that's why there's not a lot of feedback.
I
from
see
them.
that as a secondary process. I
Okay.
think just
Yeah.
submitting your initial recommendations and requesting some feedback should elicit some type of guidance that will
That
be
is our
instructive.
intention.
That's- yeah,
You know, we're
hopefully
heading to
you're-
do that sometime on 24th of October because we haven't had a lot of time to do this. But typically, there is more public outreach by the preservation office, and this time they've had one meeting.
And that's the challenge we're having with this whole project. They have not really engaged the community, which is why some of the developers have taken it upon themselves to create these guidelines that since you guys are going to do a vote and we all want it to be historic, when it's done, we want it done to preserve in the best way for the community. That's why the guidelines are so important because we have not had full engagement.
So Commissioner, are there, I guess, and you may get to questions, what's your recommendation to the commission?
My recommendation is that we support, the historic designation with the guidelines that we're going to provide. And if it needs to be expanded upon, that is acceptable, but we will not support it unless guidelines are, clear beforehand.
And are those the guidelines that we just saw here?
This
This is in process.
Yeah.
Right. So you will have the ultimate goal will be a narrative that describes these. I mean, Emily's written many of these things throughout the city, and then there will be some diagrams that go with it to provide, you know, specific clarification. But that would be hopefully the ultimate goal before the November 3rd hearing, and then there's a whole question of whether they even accept it or not, you know.
But if they don't accept the guidelines that are being proposed, we don't want to support it. So we want support with guidelines issued so that the property owners know what changes they can make, when they do go to make changes. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, we sort of glossed over it a little bit, but, you know, there are a number of things that, you know, like if you wanted to make a change to a window, or you wanted to add an air conditioning unit, or you wanted to, you know, there's a number of things listed here that right now you could not do without going to HPRB. And so one of the things the guidelines would do would sort of clarify and say, look, if you want to just, you know, create another door to your business, you don't have to go to HPRB to get permission. If you want to build a building above it, okay, fine, you need to go to HPRB. And it's sort of those kinds of details that still need to be worked out and fleshed out.
And because I have done this so often, I can definitely tell you that this has been rushed through, and there has not been what we would typically expect participation with property owners, the community, and the ANC. So we're here.
And that's where I am, Commissioner, and I would ask that you take the lead in terms of requesting extension to the process, because I don't feel comfortable voting. I think your guidelines are moving in the right direction. However, absent a narrative that I can actually read and assess, I think it would be irresponsible for me to vote, you know, in favor. And I think it sounds like we need more time.
I think we actually have preliminary, guidelines, because I've actually seen them, so I know we do have preliminary guidelines that they've been working on since the beginning of this, but since they had 10 minutes to present, they needed to present as quickly as possible. So we can send the guidelines to, everyone that needs to see it, because the guidelines would be submitted without that. So, it's not a matter of them not having or having workable guidelines, we have those already. We just need to stop the train before it really gets out the
But
gate.
what's wrong with giving your community more time?
I don't think we're gonna have more time, that's the sad part, they have not engaged us. You know, at our last letter requested additional time and to give directives that they do engage the community. They gave more time, but they gave no directives to engage, so now we're making them engage us by submitting our document.
Right, frankly, they gave more time, they didn't really give a reasonable amount of more time. They, you know, they
Maybe the minimum.
gave.
Yeah, exactly, what is the minimum, and they didn't force them to do anything within those times.
So Commissioner, would you like to put a motion on the floor?
Yes, I'd like to put the motion on the floor to support historic designation with the prescribed guidelines that will be submitted, from the owners.
Is there a second?
Second.
Moved and seconded, is there any further discussion?
Discussion.
We're gonna leave this open to just 1 minute per person, please, commissioners.
Discussion.
Anderson.
I think we may end up where we need to end up, but for me, mine is a process issue at this point. So I can't vote for something that I have not fully evaluated. What I've heard here, it sounds like you're moving in the right direction. I think that you need more time, and that's where, and if the Historic Preservation Review Office has not been responsive, then certainly you can send a letter, this commission can send a letter to the State Historic Preservation Officer, David Maloney, and or Eric Shaw, who's the Director of Planning, to make sure that this process is comprehensive enough to allow for ample owner participation and citizen participation.
I agree with that, but my only concern, we've already done that. It has not worked, so we need to be a little bit more aggressive and we need to have the guidelines. Because we did that last month.
I don't have the document.
Or,
Okay.
we can get the guideline, or,
What, after the vote?
no, the guidelines will be provided to the committee to approve, or the commission to approve before, because Commissioner, Roberts has to, create the document. You can see the guidelines in advance of the document being submitted,
When
that's
can we
it.
get them the guidelines?
What you're asking is to vote
Tomorrow?
before it's submitted.
Okay, is there any further discussion, commissioners?
Yeah, we can get you a draft of the guidelines tomorrow. I mean, we have 30 pages of text. That we
When you
can-
go back, when is your hearing? You said November 3rd?
Yeah.
Well, that's not gonna help us. We're here tonight.
That's the problem,
But
right?
see,
That's
and
the
that's the
problem.
big problem, it's like, we don't have time, and we asked for extension, they gave us a 30-day extension, which was the minimum, but they're doing no engagement, which they're supposed to do, so we had to do it ourselves.
So one suggestion I might make, Commissioner, is, similar to last time, we said we were gonna ask for an extension, and if we don't extend, we stand in opposition. So we could do something similar here.
But we want historic designation, that's the only issue. I don't want to oppose it, which is the same thing I said last time. We want historic designation, we just don't want it to be done in a manner that is not good for the area. I would never say I oppose historic designation, because that's not the case.
Okay, any further discussion?
Well, so why can't we just support the historic preservation without the guidelines?
The
And let the
guidelines,
guidelines, and let the committee, once we show that we have support for it, let these guys take care of providing the guidelines in the process. 'Cause
but that's not how it's been done with other areas in the city. Typically,